It was supposed to be a routine trip for a quiet school horse, but in 1956, a tired grey gelding was minutes from slaughter, until a latecomer named Harry Delia handed over $80 and rewrote both their fates. No one watching that day imagined this horse would soon leap over 5-foot fences, or that his story would inspire the legend of a rescued slaughter horse becoming jumping champion. How did an unwanted plough horse outjump pedigreed rivals and return again and again to the man who believed in him? This is where the improbable partnership begins. The winter air at the New Holland auction yard hung thick with the scent of hay, oil, and fear. Trucks rumbled in and out, their beds crowded with horses whose futures had already been decided. In 1956, the market for unwanted horses was brisk and unforgiving. Many ended up as dog food or glue, their value measured only by the pound. On that day, Harry Delia, a Dutch immigrant and riding instructor for the Knox School on Long Island, steered his car into the lot, late because of a flat tire. By the time he arrived, most of the bidding had ended. The last horses, tired and unsold, were being herded toward a truck bound for slaughter. Harry scanned the pens, searching for a calm, reliable horse he could use for his students. He caught sight of a grey gelding, flecked with dirt and sweat, standing quietly as men shouted and gates slammed. The horse's coat was rough, his mane tangled, but something about the way he stood, steady, almost resigned, caught Harry's attention. As the handlers pushed him up the ramp, Harry stepped forward, his boots crunching on the icy ground. For a moment, the horse turned his head. Their eyes met. One man, one horse, both shaped by hard years and silent hopes. In that instant, Harry made his decision. He called out to the auctioneer, offering $80 in cash, barely more than the going rate for meat. The bid was accepted without ceremony. The handlers pulled the grey gelding back from the truck, the deal done in seconds. Harry pressed the bills into a chapped hand, took the end of the lead rope, and walked the horse away from the noise and chaos. The other buyers barely noticed. For most, this was just one more animal off the books, another transaction in a long day. Snowman, as he would later be named, followed Harry with quiet steps, leaving behind the only world he had ever known. Years of pulling a plough across Pennsylvania fields had left him strong, if worn. There were old scars on his knees and the unmistakable wear of harness rubs along his withers. But beneath the dirt and fatigue, Harry saw a softness in his eyes, a willingness to trust, even after everything. On the drive back to Long Island, the grey gelding rode in the trailer with his head low and silent. Harry had found what he needed, a gentle, steady horse for his school, bought for less than the price of a new saddle. Neither of them could have guessed that this quiet rescue, made in the shadow of a slaughter truck, would mark the start of a partnership that would astonish the world. For now, there was only the hum of the road, the warmth of the cab, and the promise of a second chance. Snowman settled into his new life on Long Island with quiet dignity. For months, he carried children and beginners at the Knox School, steady as a metronome, never putting a foot wrong. He seemed content to plod from lesson to lesson, his plough horse muscles now moving under a saddle instead of a harness. But Harry needed to make room for newer horses, and seeing Snowman's gentle nature sold him to a neighbor, a local doctor just a few miles down the road. The new owner wanted a calm horse for his own children, and Snowman, as always, obliged. That should have been the end of it. Yet within days, Snowman was back at Harry's farm. No one saw him arrive, but there he stood at the gate, covered in sweat and mud, a length of rope trailing from his halter. The neighbor called, puzzled. He had left Snowman in a secure paddock surrounded by a 5-foot fence. Harry walked Snowman back, thinking it was a fluke. The next morning, the story repeated itself. Again, Snowman had cleared the fence, crossed 6 miles of open country, and found his way home. The doctor tried everything, tying a heavy tire to the lead rope, raising the enclosure, double-checking the latches. Nothing worked. Snowman simply jumped, dragging the tire behind him, determined to return to the only person who had ever given him a second chance. In later years, Harry would recall the moment with a smile and a shake of his head. In interviews, his voice softened as he described watching the grey gelding leap out of the neighbour's paddock, tire and all, then gallop straight for the farm. "He just wanted to be with me," Harry said. "He jumped out of the enclosure to get to me." It was a revelation. Most horses would balk at a 3-foot rail, let alone a 5-foot fence. Snowman seemed to float over obstacles meant to keep him in. Harry's curiosity grew. He set up higher fences in his own field, watching as Snowman cleared them with room to spare. What started as a nuisance, an escape artist's stubborn loyalty, became something else entirely, the first glimpse of untapped talent. Harry realized he hadn't just rescued a gentle school horse. He had bought a partner with heart, scope, and a drive to belong. Without hesitation, Harry bought Snowman back from the neighbor. He led him home for good, this time with the certainty that the horse had chosen him as much as he had chosen the horse. The bond was sealed not with ribbons or trophies, but with a series of moonlit escapes and the unwavering determination of a horse who refused to be left behind. The next chapter would not be about quiet rides in the paddock. Harry had seen what Snowman could do, and the world of show jumping was about to meet its most unlikely contender. Morning chores at the Delia farm started early, but Harry always made time for Snowman. Instead of the rigid drills favored by elite stables, their training unfolded in quiet, steady moments, walking through the paddock, trotting over poles, cantering long lines along the fence. Harry believed in building trust before asking for brilliance. Snowman, still broad and thick from years in harness, moved with a slow, rolling gait. At first, he seemed almost bored by the small jumps set out in the grass. 3-foot fences barely registered, and he would step over them with the same sleepy calm he brought to carrying beginners. Harry watched, puzzled, as Snowman knocked rails or drifted sideways, never showing the spring or sharpness that judges loved. But when the jumps rose to 4 feet and beyond, something changed. The grey gelding's ears pricked forward, his stride lengthened, and he lifted himself cleanly over the rails, ears forward, knees tucked, landing light. It was as if he needed a real challenge to wake up. Harry's daughter Harriet would later recall how Snowman learned to adjust his stride, figuring out distances not by rote, but through trial and error, always willing to try again. At first, Snowman would drift right or left to make the approach work, but with patient schooling, he learned to stay straight, listening for Harry's quiet cues. Instead of pushing for quick results, Harry relied on repetition and calm encouragement. He set up grids, series of small jumps spaced at measured intervals, so Snowman could practice finding his rhythm. Some days the pair worked on shortening and lengthening the canter stride between fences, a skill that separated true jumpers from ordinary horses. Harry never forced the pace. He let Snowman puzzle things out, rewarding effort with a pat or a word. Over time, the awkwardness faded. The horse who had once been content to plod began to anticipate the next fence, ears flicking back for direction. Other trainers in the area took notice when Harry started entering local shows. Snowman, still rough-coated and plain, lined up against sleek, high-bred jumpers with names traced in blue blood. The first time he beat a pedigreed rival, eyebrows rose. By the end of the season, he was quietly collecting ribbons at heights that most school horses never saw. Harry's approach, loose rein, steady voice, and absolute trust stood in sharp contrast to the tight, controlled style of the era. Where others micromanaged every stride, Harry let Snowman find his own way to the jump, believing that the horse's instincts mattered as much as his own experience. The transformation was measured not in sudden leaps, but in steady progress. A cleaner round here, a higher fence there, a growing sense that this partnership could go further than anyone expected. The quiet plough horse, once overlooked and nearly lost, was learning to fly, not through force, but through a shared confidence that grew with every ride. The next test would come on a bigger stage, but in these early sessions the foundation was set: trust, patience, and a willingness to believe in the impossible. At Madison Square Garden, the air crackled with anticipation. Every November, the National Horse Show drew the best show jumpers in America, sleek thoroughbreds with pedigrees stretching back generations, horses valued at more than most houses. The jumps rose to 6 feet, the crowds pressed close, and the arena lights turned every round into a spectacle. In 1958, a grey gelding with old harness scars and a school horse's calm gaze entered the ring with Harry Delia in the saddle. Few in the stands expected much. Snowman was a grade horse, a nobody among blue bloods. But as the bell sounded and the first rail loomed, something changed. Snowman moved with a quiet confidence, his canter steady and unhurried. The first fence, a towering oxer, barely seemed to slow him. He gathered himself and lifted off, clearing the rails with room to spare. One by one, the jumps fell behind them. Verticals, combinations, the infamous triple. Where others hesitated or rushed, Snowman never faltered. Harry rode on a loose rein, trusting the horse beneath him. Each fence was a question, and Snowman answered with a clean, honest jump. The crowd, at first polite, grew louder with every round. By the final fence, the entire arena was on its feet. The scoreboard told the story. Against horses worth $50,000 or more, Snowman finished with a perfect round. He had beaten the favorites, horses bred for this very arena, trained since birth for the Garden's lights. The judges awarded him the Open Jumper Championship. For the first time, a grey-grade horse had claimed the top prize at Madison Square Garden. Reporters rushed to Harry, asking for the horse's breeding, his secret. Harry just smiled and rubbed Snowman's neck. He said, "He's got heart." That night, word spread beyond the equestrian world. The Cinderella horse had arrived. A year later, the story repeated itself. In 1959, Snowman and Harry returned to the Garden. The competition was tougher, the jumps even higher. Once again, Snowman faced a field of champions. Once again, he cleared every fence. No horse had ever won back-to-back Open Jumper titles at Madison Square Garden, not until now. Snowman's second victory made headlines across the country. Life magazine sent photographers to capture the unlikely pair. The immigrant rider and the rescued plough horse, triumphant beneath the bright lights. Prize money, blue ribbons, and national acclaim followed. But for Harry and Snowman, the real victory was in the partnership itself. In the arena, they moved as one, rider and horse reading each other's cues, trusting in every stride. The underdog had not only beaten the odds, he had set a new standard for what was possible. From that moment, Snowman's name belonged among the legends of the sport. The gates of Madison Square Garden had opened wide enough for a plough horse to walk through and to soar. Camera flashes lit up the arena as Snowman and Harry Delia stepped out of the ring, blue ribbons pinned to the bridle. The story of the rescued plough horse and his immigrant rider swept across the country. Within weeks, Life magazine ran a full spread calling Snowman the Cinderella horse. The nickname stuck. Headlines marveled at the pair who had toppled pedigrees and redefined what a champion could look like. Snowman's fame leapt far beyond the world of show jumping. Invitations poured in from television studios. Harry and his family found themselves on national television, and Harry later recalled appearances on The Tonight Show. These segments put Snowman's gentle eyes and steady stride into millions of living rooms. Audiences who had never set foot in a stable now knew his story. Letters arrived from school children, farmers, and city dwellers alike, all drawn in by the idea that an unwanted horse could become a hero. As the press followed their every move, the offers started coming. Wealthy buyers dangled blank checks. Harry once turned down an offer as high as $100,000, a staggering sum in the late 1950s. For Harry, there was never any question. He told reporters that Snowman was family. Snowman stayed on the farm, carrying Harry's children bareback and posing for holiday cards, even as his legend grew. The Cinderella horse had become a symbol of more than victory. It stood for loyalty, second chances, and the kind of partnership that could capture a nation's imagination. Snowman spent his final years in the quiet pastures of the Delia farm, far from the glare of show rings and city lights. Retirement brought slower days, gentle rides with Harry's children, long afternoons grazing, and visits from neighbors who remembered the horse that had once captivated the nation. There were no more blue ribbons to chase, but Snowman's gentle presence lingered as a reminder of everything he had overcome. In 1974, Snowman died at home, surrounded by the family who had given him a second life. He was roughly 26 years old, his story already woven into the fabric of American equestrian history. Harry and his children kept his memory alive, sharing stories of the plough horse who had leapt over every barrier placed before him, literal and otherwise. Decades later, Snowman's legend found new life. In 1992, he was inducted into the United States Show Jumping Hall of Fame, honored alongside the sport's greatest names. Elizabeth Letz's book, The $80 Champion, published in 2011, reached the New York Times bestseller list and introduced his story to a new generation. 4 years later, the documentary film Harry and Snowman premiered, bringing rare footage, family interviews, and Harry's own voice to screens around the world. Today, Snowman is remembered not just for his improbable victories, but for the bond he shared with Harry and the message his story carries. On the Delia farm, the memory of a grey gelding bought for $80 endures, a reminder that greatness can come from the most unlikely places, and that the right partnership can change everything. Every year, over 20,000 American horses are shipped to slaughter, many with untapped potential. Snowman's legacy endures as proof that greatness can come from the most overlooked places. As adoption and rescue reshape the future of equine sports, his story challenges us to see value where others see none. Sometimes, the champion we need is the one nobody expected. Share your thoughts on Snowman's legacy below.